There's a lot probably to discuss from what you've said. I just want to hear from, and that's kind of what you were talking about and what I was talking about just then. There's a little nice picture with the barrier in fees and how just brute force won't get you to break through that barrier because you just don't have enough time unless you start building out those teams, as Ed kind of really went through really well with us just then. Jamie, just to pivot to you for a moment, you've got 7 steps to managing, it's quite a lot of steps actually, 7 steps to managing traffic flow. Could you lay out some of those for us this morning and how you've managed to do what Ed has just laid out for us in your own firm at Sky Accountants?
Geez, Tim, you put me on the spot. I'll have to remember.
I know, I realize that. It doesn't have to be all 7. We can just go through some.
Look, just to pick up from what Ed said, you can always address the symptoms and not the problem. You've really got to address the problem. And I think the first point to recognize is it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Everyone's got 8 hours a day. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Miami or Denmark, you've got 8 hours a day. The problem is just time. Every firm owner I speak to just lacks time. Yeah. That's really your first limitation. You've got to recognize your limitations. I'd encourage anyone that's here to grab the little ebook that we wrote at Wize called Highway to the Danger Zone. So if you haven't got that, make sure you reach out to Selena and get a copy of that book. But basically in that book, we go through why people run out of time. And if you simply just keep winning more clients and then keep adding team members and getting everyone to report to you, then yeah, you're going to be overwhelmed because you've only got 8 hours in a day. And that's where people just keep working and keep responding to all the clients, adding the clients. So part of that solution is, as I think Ed touched on earlier, is definitely to have your A and B class clients managed by a senior client manager, and you get your C and D class clients and they be managed by your assistant manager. So straight away with the communication traffic, you've either got rid of it or you've halved it. So that's really the first thing. But look, the other thing, Tim, like you're showing on the screen there, at a mental level, I think the way that your firm works can sort out a lot of the traffic itself. And I remember Ed saying this to me years ago. Clients would ring the office and say, well, when are you going to start my work? When are you going to finish my work? How much is it going to cost? Who's doing my work? Right. So you get all these questions. When do I drop it off? Like it's just over and over. So if you don't have a backbone, if you don't have a system to cater for that, you're just going to get yourself and your team are just going to get all these questions. So years and years ago, I just came up with these 7 steps that really probably, Tim, got rid of 80% of all that and all that traffic. So the first one was in Australia, we were really early to adopt the cloud. So move clients to 0 was one. So it doesn't matter whether it's QuickBooks Online, the cloud just saves time. And I know 10 years ago when I moved Sky Accountants to predominantly the cloud, we picked up 30% productivity straight away because we had this thing called a single ledger, right? And a single ledger is just what the client's working on is what your team's working on. We were really reluctant to take on clients who weren't in the cloud because it was just 30% less efficient. And so when we met clients, we moved the clients to the cloud for free. So if they were they had their books on their hard drive and they used to drop it off on a disk or a USB. That's just so inefficient. So move them to the cloud. And if you do it for free, if you can do it for free, sometimes we charge a fee depending on the size of the client, but you'll pick up that efficiency. So you can just imagine all the communication on emails and phone calls that dropped off because you could just log onto the client's file and have a look at what you wanted to see. And it was in real time, Tim. Yeah. So I don't have to, so hopefully everyone understands that. The second step there was schedule all your work. And so if you're not scheduling your work, then it tends to create chaos because people wonder, well, when do I drop it off? Or they just drop it off ad hoc. So you've got to schedule the work. And it's just we always talk about a quad 2 activity, quad 1 and quad 2. Quad 2 is like just planning ahead. And these days, if we don't send out our client scheduling letter, they're so well educated. They say, oh, like when you want me to drop, I haven't got my letter yet. So schedule your work. So you can imagine the amount of traffic that reduces because they're just organized. Collect all the information up before you start the job. That sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Collect the info before you start the job. And then the next one, or maybe you should give them a price before you start the job. So you don't have to fix price it. Even if you time bill, you can still give them an estimate. And if you think about this, everyone, what you're doing here is you're building a system that automatically manages their expectations. So if you can manage a client's expectations, you'll never really lose a client. We look at the 5th one there, explain to the client, what's the turnaround time? When will you finish the job? That's the next one, because everyone wants to know, well, when will my job be finished? Sort of thing. Depending on your firm and its policy, but we tended not to charge for phone calls and emails, and that's just little ones. ones, just sort of little ones. We would just build that into the package. And your last one is make sure with your A and B class clients, have an annual general meeting with your bigger clients, speak to them, and often you can give them like a health check or a wealth check as well. So that was sort of the steps that long time ago now that I developed. And then you can see down below the apps, Tim, that you can build around that. So it doesn't have to be those apps, but what you've got to do to get this right is to overlay the technology with your policy, and then how you do things, which is really your content or your intellectual property, and then make sure you've got the people trained in that process. We used to have big posters around our office of this.
Yeah, I love it.
I got these big posters drawn up. So over the years, the apps might change or that sort of thing. A lot of people can see those apps there, like that you can use Carbon, Practice Ignition, there's Go Proposal. There's so many apps that you can use. So I just found, Tim, that backbone, if you like, or that guarantee, whatever you want to call it, it just really helped with reducing the amount of traffic that our firm had, and to a great. And if you overlay that with the deep and narrow team that Ed touched on, have your production team, have your assistant manager and your senior client manager, it just works absolute wonders. And, these days I run 5 teams and close to 4 million turnover, and it just works. And every time I do one of these things, then it used to be me as the senior client manager, but these days it's the senior client managers. They'll get inundated with traffic, particularly as you scale you get to 600,000, that first barrier touched on. It's not exact science, but they're roughly the barriers that you'll hit. But once you've got the secret ingredient to this, you can build your second team, get your first team done, depending on what your goals are and how big you want to grow your firm. But once you learn the recipe of this that bakes the famous cake, you can do your first team and your second team, and away you go.
Yeah, love it, Jamie. I really love it. When you were talking before, and something Ed was saying before made me think, all of this is just building a system that helps you manage your clients, and they don't manage you.
They don't manage you. That's exactly right.
You manage your clients.
Yeah, what I found was before I had all this, back in the early days when I started Sky, the client's chaos was my chaos. I handled it by brute force up until maybe 400,000 or 500,000. Like, it ended up in hospital from overwork, of course. But you have to get to a point to get a system and be highly organized. Now, we haven't even touched on the org charts here either.
No. There's so much we could do.
Just the org charts, people in the right seat, doing the right work. We haven't even touched on that. You want your junior accountants and your bookkeepers doing the right work. You don't want your most expensive person doing the wrong work, doing the easiest work. And often that happens all the time. So that's why if you get a chance in the vault to read about the quad activities, what's urgent important versus what's not urgent important. So probably I'll finish, Tim, on my role at Sky as the CEO. I still look after the HR portfolio. I still do all the hiring. My number one priority is making sure every team has enough capacity, because if your firm doesn't have capacity, hiring such a big thing, I'm relentless. I'll just keep hiring until I know each team's got capacity. And once they've got capacity, it's like business 101.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think one thing I hear sometimes from the firms I work with is that, they complain about the clients. They go, this client's no good, they're demanding, or they're always asking me questions around how much it is, or how much it's going to be, or how quick it's going to be. And I always think, Jamie, what Ed always talks about, dealing with the problem, not the symptom. Just looking at this, step 1 through 3 really makes the production team's job and life a lot easier, because they don't have to do 3 months worth of work in 1 month. They don't get stuck on jobs because they get as much information as you can get before they start. And steps 4 through really 7 makes the client manager's life easier. It genuinely makes it easier. It's a better experience for the staff, not just the clients.
The whole thing just hums, Tim. Like, we would have our office manager collect all the information. And then over a few years, people would say, how do you train your office manager to understand what a loan statement is, what a settlement statement is, or a car contract? And we would educate them. They would audit and have a big list of stuff that we needed from the client. And it's a bit like a tradesperson. They come to build a fence, they didn't bring the nails, and they left the hammer back at the shed. Right? It's just inefficient. And we all know ourselves, if we've got all the equipment, all the information that we need before we start a job, man, you can fly through it, and productive people are happy people.
Yeah, exactly. No, awesome. Thanks for that, Jamie. Really love this stuff. It's kind of the most basic stuff, and it seems so simple when you and Ed talk about it, but I think it's all in the implementation as well. It really is the implementation.
Claude, I love what Ed said years ago. Like, if you can get 80% of this right, what we're talking about, there's going to be days when there will be chaos. Like, someone will need their work done tomorrow because they're selling a business or they're getting a loan, but you'll be able to deal with the chaos. That's the thing. You'll be able to drop everything and say, okay, I've got time because the rest of my firm is 80% organized.
Right.
And so there's always going to be chaos, but it's just if you can deal with the chaos.
It's manageable. manageable. 80% chaos is it's not manageable.
No, it's not the other way around.
chaos.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
exactly right.
Thanks, Jack.